So I received a question from the sight of an owl. Hello, the sight of an owl. And you say, if you could take out a criterion release and replace it with another movie from the same director, what would those two movies be? I would take out Fire Walk With Me and replace it with Lost Highway. Oh, the sight of an owl. Thank you very much for your question. It's a very interesting one, and you gave your example of those David Lynch works. And so, my goodness, if I could take out a Criterion release and replace it with another movie from the same director, what would it be? This is an interesting one. It's really difficult, too, because there are so many films, and I'm always hesitant to mention a film taking out something from the collection, because it's always nice to have a Criterion collection that is as inclusive as possible, if you know what I mean. And so it would be ideal to have all the works of a particular filmmaker, or as many as possible. But if I were to try to answer your question, I think it would be... Okay, here we go. Here's something that comes to mind, which is the filmmaker Todd Solondz. He made a number of films, and one of them is in the Criterion collection at the moment, I understand, which is Life During Wartime. And it's a very interesting, very challenging work. It's very shocking in a lot of ways. And he has this acerbic type of witty style that is associated with that film and in other films, in fact. Now, the thing about Life During Wartime, which is, I think, as I say, a really fascinating work in and of itself, but it does have connections with previous works by Todd Solondz. And I think perhaps most directly it has connections with films like, say, Happiness. And also you can say other films by Todd Solondz. But whenever I watch Life During Wartime, I always feel the urge to want to watch the other films by Todd Solondz, in particular the film Happiness. And so if I were to try to answer your question, maybe I would say Life During Wartime, not because it's a bad film, I think, but because it makes me want to watch the earlier works of Todd Solondz. And so in an ideal world, maybe as many of his works would be included. But to answer your question, maybe instead of Life During Wartime, maybe Happiness, or maybe even Welcome to the Dollhouse. And then maybe later down the line, we could have Life During Wartime reemerge. But that's how I'd probably answer the question. So I have nothing against Life During Wartime per se, but if you know this film, you know that it does rely quite heavily, in fact, on perhaps some kind of understanding or maybe some kind of engagement with the films, with the previous films, in particular with the film Happiness. And so maybe having that earlier film or some other earlier works in its place might be an interesting thing. But again, if I say that, then of course what I would counter respond would be, okay, if there's Happiness, then it would make me want to watch the other films, which would be Life During Wartime. So it becomes this endless cycle, perhaps, of replacement, of removal and replacement, removal and replacement. So in an ideal world, it would be great to have all of those works in one. But that would probably be my best way to answer the question. And in that way, too, I want to say thank you very much, the sight of an owl. And I would like to present this question to the rest of the audience, the rest of the viewers here, if you're interested. How would you answer the question from our dear friend, the sight of an owl? If you could take out a Criterion release and replace it with another movie from the same director, what would those two movies be? Please feel free to leave your responses in the comments section below. And the sight of an owl, thank you very much, my dear friend. I hope you're well, and cheers.